Grand March 3, Queenstown, and Chelsea.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1, Stowe.
Earl, Danville, Beecham, and Cabot.
Charles Wilson, Caledonia 3, which is Lindenville, Sheffield, Wheelock, Sutton, and North.
Mount David Templeman, Orleans 3, Brownington, Barton, and Westmore.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate that. So it's a pleasure to be here today. So my name is Glenn Evans. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Ag and Food Entrepreneurship at Vermont State University. I should be joined by my colleague, Dr. Demetrius Reed, who is our Meat Facility Director. So he'll hopefully be popping in when he wraps up at the center. But my hope today is to go through and provide a little bit of update about the Center for Ag and Food Entrepreneurship, what we've been up to, and where we hope to go. So just in terms of a little bit of background about where we were and how the center was formed. So then Vermont Technical College was having some challenges within ag programming. Our enrollments were down, and the cost of managing those programs and the affiliated dairy herd was extensive. And so a decision was made, a difficult one at that time, to sell the dairy herd that Vermont Technical College had and to put the ag degree programming on pause. But that wasn't to be the end of the story. It was a call to action to transform, knowing that we had a true workforce need within our ag and food economies, and that we needed to pivot and to meet that need. And so what happened next was an assembly of very talented folks, nearly 45 individuals from industries within Vermont State, not-for-profit organizations, affiliated with our food systems, forestry, and agriculture came together. And that committee was charged to provide some recommendations to then Vermont Technical College about how we could move forward successfully with the program. So back in June of 2021, they came out with a final report that called out some key transformative steps that the college could take. The first was to create the Center for Ag and Food Entrepreneurship. Within that was to move away from sort of the dairy-centric model of the past and to expand our degree pathways so that we're more diversified. And as part of that, to include robust internships that would be 4-credit offerings that would be capstones within that degree program. They also made a recommendation for diversification in the types of enterprises or activities that we would have within ag and food programming, particularly within our meat processing and knowing the workforce demand in those areas. So to make this a risk-off proposition for the university, major grant funding has been secured through the center to help upstart both the programming and to support the staffing. So currently we have around $3 million in grant funds. That funding provides a 3-year runway for 3 full-time staff, so myself, Dr. Reed, and a third to-be-hired person. We also have funding in place supporting some of our farm improvements, some of our marketing needs around certificate trainings, and some equipment investments within the forestry area. We're also fortunate that we have nearly $1 million that are going towards the renovation of a space for our meat processing facility.
And do you mind, I'm not seeing any questions yet, but do you mind if we interrupt if we do have questions?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
And so I mentioned this advisory committee, this group of folks that has come together that has been charged with helping us figure out a path forward that makes sense and that meets the workforce needs. And so these are some of the individuals who have been extremely active in that process and that remain active and that remain an advisory committee for us as we continue to move forward. So you may recognize some of these individuals, but again, a broad depth and breadth of knowledge, a real resource base for the center. So a snapshot of where we are right now with the center. So back in June of last year, under then President Mike Smith, the center was officially formed and I was hired. In October of last year, we were very fortunate to hire Dr. Reed. And so he comes to us with extensive meat science experience from Texas and North Dakota and experience leading teaching facilities within meat and butchery. So we're extremely fortunate to have him as part of our team. and we're currently hiring our third member. So this will be a training and internship manager. This is a position that will help with all the logistics around our certificate trainings, as well as the structured internships that would be part of an associate's degree. We continue to work closely with this Ag Advisory Committee. Currently, they're being charged with helping us in a number of different core areas. So helping us with planning for farm facility improvements, with student recruitment, fundraising, with our short courses or trainings, our curriculum offerings, and activities related to the meat processing facility. So I mentioned the meat processing facility, and my colleague will share more about that in a minute. But basically, this is one of the cornerstones of the center, and it's officially a go and something that we're in design and construction on now. We're continuing to be engaged with our living lab spaces, and I'll share an aerial of that shortly. But this basically is all of these spaces around campus that we leverage as part of teaching. So we're going through a process now, as you can imagine, of consolidating how we use those spaces, divesting of certain pieces of equipment and resources we no longer need, and then reinvesting those resources elsewhere. So as many of you are probably aware, Vermont State University has been going through a lot of change, right? A lot of somewhat difficult and challenging change. And as part of that process, through this optimization offering, all of our ag, forestry, and landscape architecture courses and programs were paused. So what we are at now is positioning for a future state and making a case that what we would like to offer, which is a single pathway associate's degree in ag, food, and forests, will move the university forward and meet all of the sort of case analyses and academic approvals that are necessary to go forward. So as part of that process, one of the ways we're pivoting in a significant way is through an increase in how we partner. We partner with our private industry folks who are doing things well, who are being entrepreneurial, and I'll share a little bit more about that as I go forward. So in a nutshell, the mission of the Center for Ag and Food Entrepreneurship is to be Vermont State University's gateway in the areas of skill building in agriculture, food, and forest systems. So the way we tackle that is threefold. One, we create and provide immersive workforce development opportunities. So this is that associate's degree that I mentioned that's pending, as well as a broad suite of certificate trainings and short courses. The second is through our living lab spaces. So this is the land, this is the facilities, the equipment, the instructors that we have in and around campus. And the third is through developing private partnerships. So these are the connections with folks in industry who are doing things really well and engaging at a scale that we simply can't recreate on campus. And so partnering with them for internship experiences and other types of on and off campus exposure. So here's there it goes. Here's an aerial of the Randolph campus that sort of outlines some of those resources that we have as part of the center. So we're very fortunate. We have over 200 acres of ag and forest land in and around campus. Some of that ag land is pastured, it's fenced, so we can graze animals. We have a farm facility that has buildings that are of various states and conditions. We have a small maple sugaring operation in Sugarbush. We have an older but still functional orchard space. On campus, there's a greenhouse. There's a meat processing facility that will be under construction. And we even have a milling center. So in addition to the forested areas, we have a milling capabilities that are associated. So in sum total, we have essentially a nice resource base to build off of in terms of providing students with those hands-on experiences right around campus. So as we've gone through this process of understanding where we need to go with an associate's degree, one of the big questions has been, well, what was done in the past and what are we proposing to do now? And is it different? How is it different? And ultimately, will it be successful? So if we look to what the offerings were in the past, they were, again, very much workforce focused, but they were fairly narrow, right? We had narrow pathways, intensively focused in dairy, and there was limited workforce outcomes. Over time, those programs were highly successful for periods. We have a number of successful alum through those programs, but our programming was largely fixed. We didn't evolve with the times. And when you think about target audience, the audience for the programming in the past was largely tailored to Vermont farm kids. So folks who are going to get an education and then go back, work on the farm, or move off and do their own independent business operations. So the way we're trying to position now in terms of future growth is, again, focusing on creating workforce-ready students, but taking a much different approach. So one of those is this funnel approach, which I'll illustrate later. But basically, it's casting a wide net, exposing and attracting students within the broad realms of agriculture, food, and forests. And from that, being able to then tailor a educational program so that we can deliver specific workforce outcomes. We'll need to continue to have programming now that isn't as fixed and that we're responsive to change. We can't make large investments and then stay static for decades. We have to constantly pivot and evolve as needs and technologies evolve within ag, food, and forest systems. And lastly, and this is an important one, is that we need to expand sort of the market base, the folks who would be interested and passionate about being part of the Vermont State University educational system. So to do that successfully, we need to tailor to a regional interest. So this is looking broadly, looking across New England, across the Northeast, and providing a resource base that's attractive enough and interesting enough that students want to come from throughout those areas to attend. And also, as we think forward, we're stepping away from sort of the farm background basis and looking to a much broader scope. So now we have students that may come to us that have an interest and say, well, I like to raise animals, or I like to grow plants, but they don't necessarily have that on-farm experience to lean into. So just a few factors about this associate's degree that I want to outline, because I think that they're critical to the sustainability of our future programming, as well as to trying to create what will ultimately be an immersive educational experience. So leveraging partnerships is a big piece of this, and we'll do that in several different ways through this associate's degree. The first is through on-campus partnerships. So this is leveraging third parties to do some of the on-campus activities that I shared in those maps earlier. So for example, right now with our pause in programming with our ag programs, we actually have a lease or a partnership arrangement with Savello's Farm. So as part of that arrangement, their dairy animals, their birthing cows and dry cows are in one of our farm facilities, and they're actively cropping the acreage around campus. This does a couple things. First, it takes the financial burden off the university to do that type of task directly and frankly inefficiently. And second, through a structure of that arrangement, we have the ability to leverage those resources, those animals, that cropping activity, and even those personnel to integrate within our teaching programs. So we can offer our certificate trainings, we can offer coursework that involves those animals, those cropping systems, and so forth. So it's a great model in that regard. And so we're looking at how we can do that at various levels around campus, again, with the teaching first mentality, but being able to utilize that land, that base in an effective way. The second way we leverage partnerships is through off-campus experiences. And so this has to be in several different directions. One is part of coursework where we're engaging with industry contacts who are operating at a scale that we simply couldn't justify on campus. So we can go out, we can have tours, we can have outreach, we can have labs, and all of these folks who are doing it right, whether it's high-end maple syrup facilities, whether it's dairy at various scales, whether it's beef systems, whether it's veg crops, you name it. We have developing relationships that we can create those types of connections. And then through those off-campus experiences, of course, is the internship piece, which is extremely important. And as a capstone of our associate's degree, allows us to get students into an industry or a workforce environment, develop and hone a specific set of skills, and then be able to leverage that when they graduate. So the other piece of this degree program that I thought was helpful to outline was, again, to emphasize the funnel approach. And again, we're approaching this from the idea that we want to cast a wide net. We want to be able to attract students that are coming with a broad range of interests or even undefined interests within these areas, and then hone that over the 2-year period. So the first year of the program is all about immersion. It's about exposing them to a wide range of industry skills and experiences within ag, food, and forest areas. From that, with careful mentoring and advising, the students are charged with defining a core area of interest, right? So where do they specifically want to hone their skills? And from that, we create tailored internship experiences. So this is where the students have a development internship experience. This is essentially a specific contract between them and a private party as to what they will learn and be exposed to through that internship. So the outcome of all this is we have workforce-ready graduates at the end of the 2 years. And not only do they have the broad base of exposure, they have a focused workforce skill. And hopefully through this process of private partnerships and the internship, they have industry contacts, folks that they know that they can leverage, that they can hopefully hit the ground running in the workforce. So just a couple other points I want to raise before I turn it over to my colleague. As you can imagine, getting approval for a associate's degree through the academic system requires a pretty extensive case study. We need to show that what we're offering is distinct, that there's demand for it, and that it's going to be energizing, it's going to be attractive, right? So in a nutshell, we've already done some of that legwork. We've looked at a number of peer institutions, over 28 of the comparables, there are none within Vermont State that are offering what we're trying to offer. And even outside the state, UNH and SUNY have some different targets. When we look at demand, we can look at demand in two different directions. On one hand, we have the industry demand, essentially the workforce need within our farm and food businesses. And we look at that sector of over 64,000 individuals, and it becomes clear that there is a workforce need, again, specifically within Vermont. When we look at the other, or the flip side of that, it's demand or interest from our students that are coming up through high school or even returning education. And if we look at our continuing tech ed centers across the state, right now, for example, there's over 600 students that are enrolled in ag natural resource program. So there's an interest base there that we can cultivate that would be natural stepping stones to jump into an associate's degree like this. And lastly, what we're trying to create or cultivate has to be dynamic. And we're very fortunate. We're here in Vermont. We have a dynamic ag, food, and forest economy. We have folks who are doing things at a variety of scales, doing them in ways that are very innovative and engaging and successful. So we can capitalize on those through building relationships that are mutually beneficial, where they know that they're contributing to the next workforce needs that they have, and us knowing that we're providing students with a well-rounded exposure in an experiential learning environment. So to sum up, sort of in a nutshell, what's next with the Center for Ag and Food Entrepreneurship? So first quarter of this year, we'll be hiring our third position. This is this training and internship manager. When that position is hired, it will allow us to expand and do a better job promoting our working lands trainings. So this is that broad suite of trainings, everything from welding to artificial insemination of dairy cattle, to organic certification, to tree pruning. In the third quarter of this year, our hope is to open our meat processing facility. So currently it's in design, we'll be in construction, out to bid and in construction shortly after. But once this facility is open, it'll allow us to support all of the training programs that are in demand and from the industry, as well as build capacity for future courses within this associate's degree. We've got a lot of work ahead of us in the coming year in terms of marketing and outreach, right? So we're rebuilding from a bit of a rocky road in terms of the communications that have come out through the university. And so that means trying to educate. It means having a clear website, social media, working through a strong alumni network, doing some more partnering with our continuing tech ed centers, continuing to host organizations like the Future Farmers for America, FFA, and participating in conferences, and of course, working with the Agency of Agriculture, Vermont Farm to Plate, and other industry partners. So again, my hope is, and what I feel is really the cornerstone of our center, is this single agriculture, food, and forest associate's degree. This is what's going to attract students into the program. This is what's going to create the energizing workforce outcomes and essentially put Vermont State University on the top of the map for programming here within ag, food, and forests. So I believe through funneling through leveraging this funnel model in these private partnerships, that we can do so in a way that will be fiscally mindful for the university and allow us to create this immersive learning experience. So with that, I want to just end my piece of the presentation. And before I hand the floor over to Dr. Reed, entertain any questions.
Representative Rice?
Thank Glenn. So there's a concern, I think, in agricultural education in general, sort of from FFA on up, that often we see that it's sort of captured by the largest in the industry because that's who has the resources to sort of engage in those private partnerships that you talked about being such an important part of it. So just wondering if that's something that you have experience with, have thought through, if you have sort of solutions that can make this sort of very specifically a different kind of program, sort of more fitting for Vermont's food and ag landscape.
That's a great question. So I think, yes, absolutely. So what we're looking at is in that immersion phase of the programming is where students will be exposed to a broad range. So like dairy, for example, we look at Vermont, we've got dairy herds that are many hundreds of cows. We have some middle size and we have a few that have two, right? So there's an opportunity there where we can show them that diversity. We can show them organic and conventional systems. And then ultimately, as they get that awareness and they're developing sort of that internship piece, that's when it's more student driven, right? So they're saying, well, this is where I'm interested in playing a role. And then we structure that internship around that specific deliverable.
Representative Lipsky?
Yes, thank you, Glenn. Appreciate your presentation, and it was encouraging in the area that I'm particularly concerned in that, forestry or forest enterprises were part of your broad goal, mission, and template. Because there was rumor within the industry that Vermont Tech, then formerly Vermont Tech, was dropping the forestry program. And I've served as an advisory role to an expanded organization called the Professional Logging Contractors of the Northeast, which was recently added in Vermont. And one thing that only existed, including New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, that there was no hands-on training for mechanized, whether it's cut per length or low impact, high-tech machinery, which is very expensive. Only in the state of Maine is there, within their education system, is a specific program. And we've had a witness here that certainly talked about their willingness to partnership, either take Vermont students to there or bring that program. And part of why that's possible is because of participation of manufacturers. If each of these pieces of equipment are 500 and 700,000, not easy to stand up, right? Especially as people center their interest. There may be 4 students, there may be 14, but that partnership, which you were highlighting in your whole curriculum development. So I just want to confirm that that's something I hope you look into, or maybe you already have dialogue with Dana Doran, who's the executive director of but that's a possibility for you to look at going forward. I'm happy outside of talk to give you some information on that. After.
Yes, I appreciate that. We're at this stage now where it's that's perfect. Like, that's a great example where there may be a partnership. And if, our tendency is to look state first, right? But if there's nothing, then it makes it seem very reasonable to go outside and see where we can develop those relationships, because for all the reasons you mentioned, just the cost and enrollment.
To piggyback on Representative Rice's question, I'm wondering if there's room in your curriculum for entrepreneurship, meaning, going out and doing it yourself as opposed to being the workforce of another enterprise.
Wonderful question. I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, I mean, we have it in our title, and I think one of the nice things, again, of leveraging the broad resources of Vermont State University is they have some good programming already established within entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So the idea is that as students come into this Ag Food and Forest Associate's degree, that some of their courses are being pulled from existing curriculum, right? And so we can have some of that entrepreneurship development courses that are essential to business preparation and success. And that can be baked into that first year of sort of immersive learning. And I think it's valuable regardless of whether they choose to go into their own enterprises or if they end up, working for someone else.
I'll ask you this, and Dr. Reed might have an answer too, but while the associate's program is being developed, in the meantime, the certificate weekend courses and other shorter courses are happening, have been happening, right? Historically, back in the Vermont Tech days, that's been
That's correct.
part of the curriculum, part of what's been altered. Is there a full complement of courses at the moment, or has it been reduced for various reasons from previous years?
Yes, that's a great question. So I would say we're scaled back right now. So we're offering a steady state suite of working lands trainings. And unfortunately, until our training and internship manager is hired, it's one of those many hats that I'm wearing and not wearing all that well. I'd love to wear it better. So we continue to offer those, and our hope is to expand those, as well as with the help of our advisory committee, we've identified some additional target areas where there is a need, community need or a workforce need, that we feel we can structure one of these certificate type trainings around.
I would imagine those have historically been based on demand, that you're offering them when there's interest and.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So some of those are, like, for example, I think one of our most frequently offered is our welding, introduction to welding class, which is a weekend class. And historically, we've tried to offer that once every month. And that seems to be fairly well enrolled. And then there's other classes that we may only offer once a year. So for example, we have the distillery experience, where it's a week-long class, where students often come from outside the state as well as internal, to learn all the ins and outs of distilling and to be toured and see various facilities and what they're doing. But that's a once-a-year offer.
And Rice?
Yeah. Two questions. The first is just, can you give examples, the ag, food and forest, and I know the meat facility is a big part of the sort of food part, but are there other examples of what sort of not necessarily farming, but other food pieces to the program?
Sure. So I think in terms of exposure, we're looking at broad-based industry. So obviously cheese, dairy is a big piece of that. The maple syrup kind of bridges the gap within the forestry and food sectors. But looking at value-added entrepreneurship, basically folks who are taking farm products and then doing the next step. So we may not have on-campus facilities to support that like we do with the meat facility, but we can still leverage through partnerships to provide exposure. So we can partner with Cabot, we can partner with others who are going to give us that sort of experience.
And then have you, the distilling course, just brought to mind the growing culture around growing grapes and making wine in Vermont. I was wondering if you've engaged with folks in that at all about bringing that to your program.
No, that's a great question. I have not actually. We're looking at creating a similar course around brewing. We have not explored winemaking.
Representative Graham, you've got a question, and then maybe we'll turn it over to Dr. Reed.
So I was just wondering on this meat facility, couple different questions, but will they be doing slaughtering too, or just the butchering part?
So we will be doing the processing. So slaughtering will continue to be done off-site, just in terms of, yeah.
So, will the farm be raising animals or will it be bringing in?
Sure, that's a good question. So it'll probably be a combination of both. But for example, through these partnerships, we're hoping we can kind of do a complete circle. So one example is we're exploring relationships on campus, on farm with Vermont Cattlemen Association, as well as the Northeast Grass-Fed Beef Initiative. So these are two organizations that help in terms of raising beef, right? So the idea is, in a perfect scenario, we have some beef being raised on farm, on campus. We're sending them off to slaughter off farm. Then the slaughter meat is heading to the facility on campus where students are engaged in that as part of the training. And then the output, the meat products, are going to our dining facilities through Sodexo. So we're kind of putting those pieces together to tell a really nice story and kind of create this nice loop essentially.
So maybe to serve as a transition here, the legislature provided funding, if I'm remembering correctly, for the meat training facility.
That's correct. So we have a combination of funds. We're extremely fortunate, and this is prior to me, so I apologize if I don't know all the information. But there is a legislative appropriation of, I believe, $387,000 that's supporting that, in addition to some working grants, CRRP funding, and then some of our internal monies with alumni and our ag transformation fund.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
Sure.
And I think the presentation, we have it continuing. I don't know if it's the same.
Yes, it is. My battery just died, so it's naturally going nonstop. You got it all down?
Yeah.
Can you still run it through without this being on? Yes. I don't know. I gotta plug it in.
I can also do it from over here.
Would you mind doing that? That's probably the simpler approach.
Thank you.
I know. Gotta love the timing, right?
Morning.
We all went around and introduced ourselves, and you were, I think, not here for that part. So we'll do another quick round of introductions. Dave, do you want to start?
Sure, David Templeman, Orleans 3, that's Brownington, Barton, and Westmore.
Charles Wilson, Caledonia 3, which is Lindenville, Sheffield, Wheelock, Newark, and Sutton.
Henry Pearl, I represent the towns of Danville, Peachum, and Cabot.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1 District, Town of Stowe.
Rodney Graham, Orange 3, which is Williamstown and Chelsea.
David Durfee, Shaftesbury, and Sunderland.
Heather Supernaut, Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
Esme Cole, Hartford.
John O'Brien, Windsor Orange 1, which is Tunbridge and Row.
Mike Rice, represent the Bennington Rutland District, Danby, Dorset, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
Josie Levitt, Grandal Chittenden, which is all of Grandal County and a little sliver of Milton.
I've lived in Orleans County.
Oh, cool.
I lived in Newport, actually Irisburg, and now I live in Rutland, so West Rutland. It's nice to meet all of you. Demetrius Reed. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I born in Texas, lived on a small farm with my parents, and then also helped my great grandparents run what I consider a small 100 acres of property with cattle, cotton, as well as watermelon cantaloupe. East Texas, we were into timber, so we were very heavy into the forestry over there. So I have my dad's side of the family is East Texas, so East Texas pine is a big family industry. Did meat science at North Dakota State, and then I started off my teaching at West Texas A&M in Amarillo, Texas. Worked there with the feed yards as well as the packing houses, some of the larger ones, Cargill, Tyson. Probably visited every beef packing plant in the United States doing beef research, as well as probably the not so norm in the United States, but in Canada, 6 of their horse plants there. So a lot of their meat was going to the EU. So it's pretty neat to see horse processing as well. But started here at Vermont State University in September, and I'm just gonna go over our meat facility updates. You can go to the next.
Sidonia, is doing double duty over here, so.
I appreciate it. Should be one more. There we go. So we were given the green light by the university system to move forward with the design and construction bids for the meat processing facility. Once we started off in September, when I met Glenn, kind of was hit with stop, don't go any further. But we were working with the budget, working within the designs, even when we were pretty much said that it was just a stop, stand still. We then met with the vice president for operations just in December, and we went through the actual facility area that will be reconstructed into the processing floor, and looked over it, looked at the concerns, looked at how it could be more functional and as well as be more regional rather than just cater to Vermont. We wanted to make sure that we were the premier school for processing. We, like Glenn talked about earlier, we looked at 20 institutions. The closest institution that has processing floor as well as a slaughter facility is SUNY Cobleskill, and they have fairly brand new, but they also are trying to work out the kinks of their facility as well. But I think we have a very positive and kind of moving forward, like I said, niche market here in New England for what we do with our certificate classes and what we will do with the associate's degree. We met with the architects and they also went through the plans with us, and we really moved the room around to make it more functional and to kind of cut a little bit of the budget from the stop at the beginning of the year, and to make sure that we were staying within the budget, but then also making sure that the facility was going to be representative of a small facility, but also could be transferred to a larger facility as well. And we'll be also putting in more grants with the Vermont Agriculture Agency in February to allocate more funding for equipment. Like I was talking to Glenn earlier today, we do know for slaughter, it's pretty simple. I can teach a student pretty much how to slaughter in maybe 2 or 3 hours, and they pretty much catch it on. We haven't changed how we slaughter animals in the last 100 years. But what is changing is the food science, the meat science, the chemical science of our processed meats. Just this past December, we had almost 6 recalls from ground beef all the way up to our snack sticks. And so the industry is really looking for students that know the further process side of meat science, so then we can limit the recalls that are going out on these larger packing plants. Next slide, please. So this is our processing floor as of at the beginning of this month. We opened up the flooring. We offered a walk-in cooler that would be able to hold up to 5 beef carcasses, at least 8 to 10 pork, lamb, and goat at one time. We also have the tables. We have a smoker that can do up to 30 bellies, 60 hams. It can do over 200 pounds worth of jerky. So this would be equivalent to what you would see a medium-sized processing plant, where we're actually 3 times smaller than them, but we get the ability to function and move around and show the parallel movement of meat from raw to finished product. And we also have, hopefully, AV televisions, be able to use those speakers and microphones as well. And next slide. So currently we offer certificate courses, and these certificate courses will also be integrated into the hopefully associate's degree. Right now we do poultry and small ruminants. The small ruminants, we do the lamb and goat. The last two classes we focus primarily on lamb. Hopefully in the next session we have classes in April for poultry and small ruminants. We're going to introduce goat. I asked a friend from down south to supply some boar goats. And so he actually has a person here in Vermont that he has actually sent some genetics to. So we'll actually have some boar goat genetics to where the students can actually see what goat meat looks like, as well as comparing it to lamb. And then we were introducing wild bird game. So we do usually chicken and turkey, but I also want to include a little bit of your quail, your pheasants, and also how you process those animals as well. Pork and beef, we do half of pork, and then either a forequarter or hindquarter of beef. And we have catered this to open to the community, open to any age. We have interest from as young as 12 years old. A mother and her son want to come to a class. We also found out that we are having people attend these classes as far as northern Maine, as far as Ohio, and as far south as South Carolina. So there is a known aspect of this certificate class. Hopefully in the next 2 years, the certificate will become more robust, being supported by the American Meat Science Association. So then now it's not just you're saying Vermont State University saying you can cut up meat, but now you'll have a national association that is backed by academic and research saying that you know how to cut and that you can go into the workforce. Next slide, please.
A question, Representative O'Brien?
Yes, sir.
Does the shop there include like live animal to slaughter, or is it just sort of you have the carcass and then you're working on the butchery?
So it will be a mix of working with some of our partners to have live animals on the farm, and then taking those animals to a local butcher and having them slaughter, and then bringing the carcasses halves to the meat lab, and then actually working them. So we don't have a slaughter facility, which is, to me, is a blessing in disguise as well. A lot of universities get a lot of flack from PETA, and they become very belligerent, and I've had issues with bomb threats and attacking our facilities. So, and I wear a PETA shirt all the time when I get slaughter. People eat tasty animals, and so it is very much, you know, when you get to the processing side, you don't have a lot of the headache that you have with slaughter facilities. Also with the offal and the water quality testing and making sure that we have good, we don't have runoff, but that it's going to where it's supposed to go. So the biggest thing that we have is right now is our just getting rid of bone and fat. But I'm thinking of actually working with our facilities manager of using their incinerator to actually just to burn that and to use that for on the orchard for added nutrition to the orchard. So hopefully it'll be all just one continuous circle. The new courses that we're going to add this year is Introduction to Butchery. So looking really at the HACCP plan, so hazard analysis and critical control points. So then our students, but also the community understands exactly what you need to do to have a processing facility, to have even where the interest is on farm slaughter or a mobile slaughter unit, to know that when you want an on-farm slaughter, you need to have your water tested. This, in Vermont, it's 6 times a year. In some states like Maine, it's less. In some states like Massachusetts, it's even more. So we want them to understand that regionally it changes because of what can be affected from slaughter on farms, runoff, but then also looking at taking care of the animal welfare, and then also getting across from once you have rendered them insensible and insensible to pain, that you're still maintaining the carcass because there still are steps that could make that animal unappealing to your consumer. And so we'll also be offering tours to some of the packing plants here in Vermont as well. And further on, I'm from Texas, and so I love barbecue. Three things you don't talk about at the table is religion, politics, and barbecue. Gotta get in a fight every time. So we wanted to bring a barbecue course to the school and to showcase. I think the way to a person's heart is through their stomach. And so we make this to where we can teach the community about agriculture, to be more transparent by offering something tasty to eat. And I use this for my students. It's a lot easier to engage them in a sausage making class when they can, yes, they're gonna grind the meat, yes, they're gonna stuff it, yes, they're gonna smoke it, but the real prize at the end is you get to taste what you make. And sometimes it's very salty, sometimes it's very oversweet, sometimes very acidic, very fatty. And it's just in life that you have to have a balance of everything when you're making and doing meat science. Offering that class, we're looking at food safety, cost, and availability. Looking at also how from Brazilian style barbecue, Australian style barbecue, even Taiwanese barbecue. I got a chance to go to Taiwan with my classmate and never thought there was a culture of barbecue in Taiwan like there is. Never know that there is a barbecue culture in Japan like it is. So it's very unique, and it's very much growing in the meat industry. And then also looking at sausage and curing meats. A lot of people don't know that you can put a certain amount of cure into your meat and it can become very poisonous. And a lot of people think you can just make sausage. It's not that simple. There is, like I said, science to it. So we had interest from community members as well as students on campus that are not ag majors right now, who would like to take this class. It's something that's a hobby for a lot of people to make sausage. And then charcuterie, it's a fad, it's Instagram worthy, it's coming up. And so we want to work with, again, local producers and local butchers. We have Babette Table in Mad River. She does charcuterie. And a lot of people don't, there is a difference between charcuterie and sausage. This is where you inoculate with mold. So the mold is actually adding the flavoring and the preservation to it. So her facility, if you're allergic to penicillin, you can't come with this. We apologize. This is very heavy mold, and it's a very old style, European style to do it. And hopefully in 2025, I pray we have students. We would like to actually enter into the Frankfurt, Germany's their dry sausage competition. So it's only offered every 5 years and to universities. So.
Hey, lots of questions. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, Representative Ryan? Do you have a question?
Oh, just while we have you here,
Thank you very much.
what is the center about Texas or East Texas for review?
Oh, yeah, there you go. Come on.
Gotta pay the enrollment first.
It's just, when I moved here, it's hard to find hardwood that is harsh enough to smoke meat. And so here I found out maples use cherry, apple, because you have those orchards. If you chop down a cherry tree in Texas, an apple tree in Texas, they're kicking you out of the town because they're hard to grow. And so there is a industry that is really starting to grow in the barbecue, and I think people don't understand that you can't just throw a cut on there, but that is what barbecue is. It's throwing the most tough, most unusable cut onto a smoker and making it tender. So
Mhm.
that's what we're gonna try to propose to our students.
I was wondering, because like South Carolina is like mustard based and it is like.
Well,
Texas
yeah,
is
well,
like a-
and I think that's, you get Texas, we're beef. We're raised in beef, we'll die in beef. And hopefully we'll be resurrected with beef as well. But it's just, yes, you have your South Carolina mustard, you have your Kansas City dry rub. But when it all comes down to it, it's just how well do you know how to regulate your pit? Like you can be South Carolina mustard, and there are people in South Carolina that say, "Don't say you South Carolina mustard. Don't accept you. I'm not going to accept you as that." But we're going to look at those aspects of it. So, looking at acidity, fat, and sweet.
Mhm.
So those keys in food science.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry.
Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, Representative Paul.
First of all, it's so exciting to see your passion behind the issue, and that's a fabulous attribute of teachers, especially because then, of course, it inspires the students who enroll. And I think just because of your, energy, I think that will encourage more people to participate in this program. And then my question is what is your level of collaboration with Rural Vermont? Because I know they're doing some cool slaughtering workshops relating to halal and kosher.
Yes.
And yeah, I was just curious.
So I attended one of their slaughter
Yeah.
classes, and it's not as inclusive. So I went to their pork and to their turkey one, and they had said that they were going to offer the ability to see slaughter side, and they did it before everybody got there. It was a little bit more layman's terms. It was your big cuts. It was taking a half hog and then just cutting it shoulder, getting the belly, getting the loin, and getting the ham. They really didn't go into specific retail cuts. They didn't go into marketing. So I want to include that into our class to where I don't really want to just look at the USDA marketing, because I think this market up here with the locality and where you're getting your food and your meat and telling your story, you can surpass the market price. And that's what we want to do, is not just limit ourselves to what the USDA says the market of your animal is. You put the time in, you put the effort, you know what the animal is, and the people that you're selling it to know where it's coming from and how it's being raised. So you should get a premium for it. And so that's the kind of aspect I would like to put into it more. Rural Vermont, they do a lot of what we're doing right now, homesteaders, people that are just hobbyists, they're just wanting to try it out. But I want these homesteaders and these hobbyists to know that they can become entrepreneurs in this and make a business out of it. Not just do it at home for yourself. You can, start selling this.
Representative Lipsy.
Yeah, thank you, Demetrius. I just want to second Esme's enthusiasm for your broad view and depth of knowledge and enthusiasm. But historically, and I'm history is only going back 1 year, but in this committee, there was a great bottleneck, and that had to do with processing in state. And we took a lot of testimony about that bottleneck and need, and what your joint vision is in Randolph is so exciting, and so the feedback we got was this is a serious need, both in workforce, skilled development, and it's very exciting to hear what you're doing, and the fact that you're drawing students or interests from all over is amazing. So thank you personally and to both of you. This could be very fruitful.
Appreciate the feedback.
Good. Well, I know you've already had a busy morning here, so we can say thank you, and Really, really, I'll echo what others said, very helpful to hear this update and encouraging.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another field trip.
Oh.
Yes, I think we should start planning.
We also.
Tasting.
Yes.